Alright, welcome to another Pioneer video. So I'm working on my Pioneer 700 today, and I figure while I've got the front end taken apart to do the plastic dipping in the headlights, I'm going to go ahead and start doing the wiring for my turn signal, horn installation, and all that, since everything's exposed. So in this video, I'm going to show you how I go about building my own system to add turn signals, a horn, and integrate the turn signals into the factory LED taillights. Alright, so real quick, I'm going to cover a few of the things that I'm using in this video. And I'll leave links to all these parts that I used in the description below, so if you want to use the same things, you can. So when I did the same basic setup on my Pioneer 1000, I used pretty much the same components. The key to integrating an aftermarket set of turn signals like we're adding to the factory brake lights is to use this Tekonsha tail light converter. And basically what it does is it's designed to take a separate input for turn signal and brake and then combine them onto the same feed and output them. If you just try to use diodes or do another kind of tail light converter that's not solid state electronics, you're going to run into problems with the LED taillights. They will not work. Many people have tried it, it just does not work. So this part right here, and like I said, I'll leave a link in the description below, is the cheapest, easiest way to effectively add that integration. This is a switch panel that we'll be adding to the dashboard, and it came completely pre-wired like this. I will have to do some rewiring on this because it's not going to exactly work for what we want to do. But basically, how I have the switches set up is, so be your left turn signal, right turn signal. We'll make this probably a horn switch right here. And then we have this spare switch for whatever you want. In our case, probably some accessory lighting on the front of the vehicle. It also comes with a USB charger here with 2 ports and a voltmeter, which is important to have. That way, if you're running your battery with the ignition on, or the engine off, you don't want to run it down too low to where you can't start it. So I always like having a voltmeter. The turn signals that I'm actually using on the front look like this right here. And what makes this different than a lot of the ones you'll see is this have 3 wires. And there's actually 2 circuits inside of here. There's a low, a dimmed setting for your parking lights. So we'll connect that to our headlight feed. That way this will be on in a dim setting. And then there's another wire that will be used for our turn signals for a bright setting, so it will actually flash when the turn signals are on. So it'll make it look more like a car. Most aftermarket turn signal kits, they just have the 2-wire version of this, and that it will not have a parking light feature. So I think it just adds a little bit of better looks to the vehicle. There's lots of options on where to install these. It's kind of up to you where you want to put it, but in this video I'll show you where I'm going to put mine. Alright, so to complete this project you'll need obviously some various gauge wires. I've got some 12 gauge for some thicker power wire and some 16 gauge for smaller wire. I've also got some 4 conductor 18 gauge wire for like the LEDs. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run a power feed. I'm not going to be using any of the existing wiring on side by side because I don't want to screw up any of the Honda systems or void my warranty or anything like that. So I'm going to run a power line, positive and negative, off the battery. There's going to be a fuse right off the rip, probably about a 40 amp fuse, and that's going to run under the front of the vehicle, up along this harness. And then there's going to be an accessory fuse panel that I'm going to mount in here, which will control all the accessories. It'll provide fused switch power for all of the accessories. Think in the future. So in this case, I'm going to have a stereo, and if I do a winch someday, that'll be on its own power feed. But I'm also going to be doing a electric dump bed, so I'm going to figure that into it. Accessory lights, turn signals, all that stuff. Each circuit will have its own power feed. All right, so here's the fuse panel that I bought. It's got 6 positions and LEDs that will turn on if the fuse is blown, which is kind of nice. It's got this main bus lug right here where the power feed comes in. And like I said, 6 branch circuits. Alright, so I've got this wire run up into the battery compartment. That'll be fused and connected to the battery. Then that comes up, it goes down. You have to snake it through, and I put it in some of this loom here to protect it. We'll zip tie it. And this comes up here. I'll zip tie it to the factory wiring loom. And it runs up and comes out right here. And then the ground is screwed with a stainless screw into one of these cross members here. And then off of that is the ground for the relay. And I just wired in a bunch of accessory grounds, and they just go nowhere right now for future use. So we'll be using these for the accessories. I put more than I thought I would need. It's always good. I can always just coil these up and tape them off. They're grounds. And then the main power, plus 12 volts, goes on the input side of this relay. So the trigger for the relay comes off of right here. This wire, it's covered in black material, runs down to the cigarette lighter plug. That's your accessory line. It's a switched with the ignition 12 volt source. So I tapped into that, and that goes in to the relay, and that will be what triggers the relay. So when you have the machine off, this accessory fuse panel and all this wiring will shut down. The output side of the relay comes to this lug here on the fuse panel that I'm showing you. All right, so there's where I mounted the fuse block. So now that I've got my power distribution set up, I'm going to build another set of cables to run to the back of the vehicle. So this larger 12 gauge power and ground will run from the front, and there'll be a switch on the dash that will control the electric lift tailgate, but that's not going to be covered in this video. I'm just putting it in now for future use. And then this other wire, this is a 4-conductor cable. This will be for our turn signals. You really only need a 2-conductor cable, but I'm going to run this 4-conductor cable again to have extra wires for future use for whatever may want to use. So you just need 2-conductor cable for your turn signals. So if you're just doing turn signals, you can just use 1 2-conductor cable if you'd like, but I'm going to run this whole setup. I'm going to put this in loom. I'm going to run it down all the way to the back to where we can use it. And you basically just have to snake it and fish it through there. All right, so now it's time to start planning how we're going to mount stuff. So you have to drill out these 5 rivets, just a really small drill bit. And then this switch panel I'm using goes right here. And if you look, where the rivets are, I mean, these holes line up exactly everywhere. It's almost like this thing was meant to go right here. And then see, on that side we'll still have room for stereo. So it's gonna look pretty nice there, I think. So first thing I need to do is drill out these rivets. And then I'll take this rubber gasket that came with the switch panel and kind of use it as a template. And I'll trace the line on the inside of here. Then I'll need to cut the plastic out on the inside of here to give us space to work with. Alright, so as far as cutting this out goes, the easiest way I've found is just score it with a razor knife. And then just push in. If you just take a nice sharp razor knife and just push it into the plastic, it will cut it. Just take your time. You don't want to mix anything up here, mess anything up. So there's our panel opening. Let's see if this will even fit. Alright. It's tight because this bar right here is almost in the way. Especially where these middle switches touch. But it can be forced into place and work. And that's another thing with the radio too. This bar it's got very close clearance. So when the radio pokes through, it has to be over a little bit from centered in this position. Alright, so as far as our switch panel goes, I need to replace some of the switches. I'm going to make this my horn switch, so I need to replace this with a momentary switch, not a latched switch. So it's just as easy as popping these tabs out, putting that in. And then this switch over here is fine. These are fine for the turn signals. The only thing is, the way these are wired together actually works out pretty good, because the first two share this positive line. And that's exactly what we want it to do, because the output from our flasher is going to be the power input. So when a lot of people ask me in my Pioneer 1000 video how I made it flash both sides with one flasher, it's because the power input to both of these is connected to the output of the flasher. So no matter which one you turn on, when it pulls the power, it's actually a pulsing circuit, and you can turn them both on and make a hazard flashers. That'll make more sense when I show you this all hooked up. And then they have this pre-wired for parking lights, so I need to see how that looks, because how I want these to work is I want the light to flash when the turn signal is actually flashing, and the parking light might just be for these little lights here. So I gotta get a 9-volt battery, try this all out, and see how it looks. Alright, so I've got some wiring done now. It's a good idea to make yourself a key. So for my 4-conductor wire, here's what I'm doing. I've got a ground connection here. Basically, just to break this down. So we've got power coming in from the circuit panel, or the fuse panel here. Goes into the voltmeter, into the top of the voltmeter, because obviously we want that not to flash. Okay, then it comes parallel to that to the input on the flasher. So this is our turn signal flasher, and it's got a key here. So your L is load, and that is your output to your switches, and then subsequently out to the turn signal themselves. You have a battery plus line, and then a negative line. So our negative is just negative. Battery plus is just switch 12-volt power. And then out of there, we've got 2 wires that run into the input to these switches. So how it works is when we apply battery voltage, you see our light comes on. Now if I turn on the left turn signal, you see it flashes. And it's also outputting that. Same thing with the right. And then both of them are for the hazards. These other switches here, well, I haven't replaced the horn one yet, but those are always active. They came in on the other circuit we ran up. So I've got 2 circuits here with 2 separate fuses down under the hood. If that makes sense. So now all I have to do is hook up my outputs. So these are going to be my outputs to the turn signals. I got the front and the rear. And then I also ran this wire up here, this white wire, for the horn. Then I took one of my spare grounds that I showed you a little bit ago, ran it, and that white wire in this loom here, and it comes down. And then I've mounted this horn on the radiator here, and there'll be a link to that also in the description. So now when I connect the white wire to the output of the momentary switch for the horn, that will work. And here's what our 2 circuits look like on the fuse panel. So it's just a matter of, if you don't want a wiring mess nightmare, you know, keep everything neat and organized. Everything's bundled up nicely. Take your time. Also, you'll notice I'm using weatherproof heat shrink connections on all of these, along with dielectric grease. That's, you know, I put a little bit on the terminal before I connect it on all this. Even this ground connection here, I pump that full of dielectric grease. This will get wet at some point, whether it's when you're power washing underneath or the front of your side-by-side, or it's rain, or you clean out the inside. This is supposed to be waterproof or water resistant, we'll call it, from the manufacturer. So everything has to be water resistant, even on the back side. Alrighty, so I've got that in place, buttoned up, ready to go. And the next step, I'm going to come back here, and I've got the bed up. We're on the passenger side, and you'll see there's this wiring harness that runs down the passenger side. If you follow it back, it goes into, there's a connection right here where it connects to the bed. That is your backup lights harness, and it comes up and goes into a wiring harness that runs to the front of the vehicle. This is the easiest spot to intercept these wires back here, but again, all connections made right here must be waterproof, soldered, heat shrinked, all of the above. So I'm going to show you basically what wires we need to intercept here, and how we'll wire in our tail light converter at this spot. Now remember, earlier we ran our wires back, so I've got this heavy cage cable, which will be in a video when I replace, make a electric tilt bed. But the one we're interested in right now is this 4-conductor wire here. Remember, it's the same color code that we used in the front. So we're actually going to intercept our parking light feed back here in this harness and send that to the front, which will then be used to power the lower lights on our switches, and it will also power the dim mode on the parking lights on the front of the vehicle. And the rest of it will just be, and then there'll be a wire that's not used here, the ground, and then we have our right and left turn signal coming from our switch, which is going to go into the taillight converter back here. All right, so I've got this harness taken apart a little bit here, or this loom. I don't want to tell you what these colors mean. So the blue with the black stripe wires, those are your brake lights, or in our case, the output for the turn signals and the brakes. There's one brown with white stripe wire. That is your parking lights. And these 2 green wires are your ground wire. So to explain how that translates to this here, so we want the 2-tow vehicle is our input. So the red wire we will connect to the brown with the stripe wire. And I should say we're going to cut both blue wires and this brown wire are going to be cut. The grounds you can just leave connected. Okay, so here's our inputs. So the white raw wire here is going to be connected to one of those ground wires. The tail light connection is going to be connected to that parking light wire. The stop connection is going to come from these blue wires on the input side. So basically, you can tie both of these together into the stop wire. And then you have your left turn, which is your yellow, and your right turn, which is your green, which we will connect to our left and right turn wires coming from our harness here. Now, on the output side, so after these are cut, the wires going back towards the back of the vehicle, you can see tail light, that will be our brown with white stripe wire. ground. It just doesn't matter. That's just going to be connected to ground. Left turn and right turn stop. This is where you separate your blue and black wire and connect it to there. And you have the 50-50 shot of knowing which one's which. Just wire them up without making any permanent connections, test it out, and see which one's which. And I'll show you what that looks like here in just a second. I know this is a little confusing. All right, so here it is connected. So in this case, our white wire was our left turn, so that's connected. This green wire was our tail light, our parking lights. So that comes over here, interfaces with the brown wire on the end. And here we go with the output for the tail light. Connects back to the brown wire. And then our stop wire, which is this red wire on the input side, connected. I just tied those two black or blue with black stripe wires together, and that's the input for that. And on the output side, I actually got lucky this time, hooked them up in the right order. So the one wire, the blue with black stripe, goes to your left turn, and then the right turn comes out and connects and goes to the other blue wire. So this is all wired up. I'll show you how it works. I'll first turn the ignition on. Okay, now you can see, since I'm back feeding our headlight wire, when I flip the headlight switch on, you can see the lights come on there. And if we go around to the back here, see we have our tail lights on. Now if I turn on our right turn signal, come back here, our right turn signal is flashing. And it's the same thing for the left side, or in this case, have them both on. So now, if we hit our brake, same thing, brake lights come on. So hopefully that makes sense. All right, so now I'm just gonna get this all tidied up, get it taped up, get it in some wire loom, and get everything zip tied to the frame out of the way. All right, so this is what we're shooting for, something like this. Everything's neat and tidy, zip tied tightly in place.